Morning, Nathan.
Anyone's in the room, can you give me a shout if you can hear me?
I can hear you, if that helps.
You can hear me. Oh, great. Okay. Yes, I was just making sure that my headphones were actually working here.
But I just
All
lost your
right.
video.
Oh, you lost my video.
Yep.
Are you? Am I here now?
No, you are a big
Okay,
gray ball right now.
I will rejoin. Give me 2 seconds here.
Hey, Shujoy.
Hi, Roseanne. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Great. Is my video working now?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely. Here we are. And I think we're just waiting on one last panel member. But while we're waiting for our last member to come on board, welcome everybody to our BrainHack Career Development Panel 2021. And hopefully this will be an informative session to kind of learn about, the different career trajectories that are available and the kinds of things that you think about when you're finishing up grad school and seeing what greener pastures might exist outside your world or bubble. But yeah, I guess the way that we're going to organize this is we're going to start with a couple of questions for each of the panelists individually, just so that we can get a sense for our panelists' respective careers, where they are right now, and kind of how they got there. For career development panels, kind of key. And then from there, we'll move on into a couple of group questions that'll be open to everybody on the panel. And lastly, we'll move from there into an open discussion where basically everybody who is currently watching right now, you'll be able to join the stage and potentially ask your questions directly from our guests right here. I am noting that we are still actually missing one last panelist. So I'm just going to send them a quick email, and then once we get there, we will get started. So 2 seconds here. All right. So it sounds like our third panelist is on their way. But why don't we just get started? So I see we have, why don't we start with Srijoy actually? So Srijoy is coming from CAMH to give us a little chat about his current career. And I guess, why don't I kind of let you just start us off here? Can you tell us about what you're currently doing?
Yeah, thanks, Nathan, and thanks for inviting me to this, to participate on this panel. So just a brief overview of myself. So I'm currently an independent scientist at CAMH and an assistant professor at the University of Toronto in the Department of Psychiatry, IMS, and Physiology. I started my lab at CAMH in January 2019, and I basically had like what would be considered like a pretty traditional career trajectory for academia. Like I got my undergrad in 2008. Immediately after that, I started a PhD program at Carnegie Mellon. I finished my PhD in 5.5 years in 2013. Immediately after that, I did a postdoc for 5 years at UBC in Vancouver. And immediately after that, I started my lab. So, in it kind of, it's a very, I think when I look back on it, it sounds like a very, linear trajectory, get your undergrad, get your PhD, get your postdoc and start your independent position. But it doesn't feel like that. Like it feels like, it's sort of in that time I've shifted fields and directions at least like 3 or 4 times. Like, and so I can get into that a little bit later in some of the questions. But yeah. So anyway, so I guess I'm here as probably the representative of the academic track.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure that, given that most of our attendees are in grad school or currently doing postdocs, they're definitely, I think, thinking about, your kind of trajectory and where you kind of went from your PhD. I guess kind of before we get a little bit deeper, do you want to give us a quick rundown of what you're currently studying and where you kind of started from to get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I mean, we do a lot of things in my lab, but the kind of focus is sort of the intersection of genetics and genomics. So like particularly like gene expression and molecular biology, and the computational side of that, which is sometimes referred to as bioinformatics, as applied to neuroscience and psychiatry. So we're really interested in understanding the brain and molecular aspects of the brain and how those aspects relate to characteristics of cells and how those cells might be disrupted in psychiatric and neurogenetic conditions like like depression and Alzheimer's disorder. Yeah, so that's kind of like a kind of essentially my lab does a lot of things. We do a lot with data. We do a lot with cellular data and molecular data, and we do a lot with like psychiatric or statistical genetics data.
Cool. And is that similar to what you did in your PhD?
Not at all.
Not at
The
all.
only part that's similar is that I work with brain cells, but it couldn't be more different.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of given that you work, your PhD work is very different from your current work as a actual scientist now. I guess what was your kind of, what did you consider when you're finishing up your PhD and then moving on to your postdoc? What was going through your head at that time?
I think so I imagine all the panelists will kind of weigh in here, but I think it's just trying to balance like my own scientific interests and I have a really broad set of things that really interest me. So, sort of trying to say like, well, what's the next thing that I can do and learn that would make me like, that will better allow me to pursue the scientific questions that I'm most interested in, as well as being like kind of consciously aware of like, what are the, what areas in science or neuroscience are most fundable, and also like what things can I focus on now that will be most likely to get me like that will position me to get a faculty job or position me to get a job in industry. So it's both like balancing like my personal concerns and personal scientific concerns, as well as my as well as practical concerns about like, well, which of the things that I'm working on are actually fundable and actually like places are hiring people who work on this kind of thing and this kind of thing, but not this other kind of thing.
So it sounds like you were kind of, from your PhD, you kind of decided, here are the things that kind of can get me a job in science, which I actually love, and I'm going to go and pursue those things so that I can do what I want to do.
Yeah, and like learn how to do those things so
Yes.
that when I'm done learning them, I will be like well positioned to to be hired. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I think with what we're hearing from Shujoy here, this is a career trajectory that I think many of us are very familiar with. But why don't we kind of pivot over to Roseanne? And before we just do that, I'm just noticing, I'll just mention, hi, Derek. Welcome to the panel. Derek is our third panelist. But I was just mentioning how we're going through and just going through a couple of intro questions so that we can understand where each of us are coming from before we jump into our group, and then finally our open discussion. But yeah, so Roseanne, you're coming from a very different, well, not very different, you're still in healthcare. But I guess if you can tell us about your current job then.
So I have a bunch of different roles. I know Derek from the Rotman as well. So it's amazing to see him. And Nathan, thank you so much for inviting me. So my name is Roseanne Alliong. I'm the Executive Director of Research, Innovation, and Translation for the Rotman Research Institute at Baycrest. I'm also the Director of Research, Innovation, and Translation for the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation, which is a solution accelerator. Like Srijoy, I did my undergraduate. I won't say what year. I will say I went directly into my master's. Again, will not say what year. Went right into my PhD, and then partway through my PhD, realized I did not want to be a professor. I did not want to go to faculty track, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my PhD. And so a mild existential crisis at the time. But I moved into research management. And in that regard, that led me to a path where I'm actually much more involved at the institutional level, doing research and applied research. I'll probably break it down, Nathan, a little bit differently than Srijoy, because in parts of my job on the Baycrest side, I oversee a team of 18 individuals. We're a support and services hub where we support clinicians, companies, researchers, not-for-profit organizations in doing applied and evaluative research. So I do projects. So I have a lab, but not a traditional lab, in the sense that we work on projects related to aging and brain health, everything from frailty, falls, cognitive neuroscience, neuroimaging. We're doing, healthcare provider education, a whole variety of things. So I still get to do protocols, REBs. I still get to, publish, go to conferences. So that's my sort of applied research side. I oversee the Research Training Center at the Rotman. So I co-lead with Dr. Asaf Gilboa, doing technical, professional, and research training for our research trainees. So I oversee that. And then on the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation side, I'm working in the innovation space, working with innovators who can be healthcare providers, can be researchers, can be companies, trying to test, implement, and evaluate new solutions for older adults in real world environments. So everything from implementing social robots, AI, exercise technology, sensors, into environments, and actually seeing how does that impact healthcare system flow and client impact. And on my other side as well, I'm the co-host and executive producer of our podcast too. So a bit of science communication. I'm going to stop there. Nathan?
That's great. That was fantastic. Yeah. I guess I'm going to ask you a similar question to what I just asked Joy.
Yeah.
Because I kind of want to highlight for people that, what you study does not necessarily define where you end up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that a lot of grad students are struggling with sometimes, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering, what did you study?
So, okay, I was a little bit diverse in my graduate studies. My master's was actually in primary cell culture, looking at inflammation models of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So I was looking at apolipoproteins. My PhD was using functional magnetic resonance imaging to look at visual perception in young adults and adolescents. And I work in geriatrics. So I have, my PhD has absolutely nothing to do topic-wise with what I do now. I would absolutely say that the training I received during my PhD is 190% essential to my job now. So for those in the crowd who are concerned that, I don't know that if I want to study zebrafish for the rest of my life, that's okay, because the things that you learned in studying zebrafish are exactly what will make you accessible and marketable in whatever you want to do. You just have to think about how you reframe it, which is what I did with my career. So yeah, I don't do anything that was related to my earlier publications or my earlier scholarships or grants. And I still love what I do.
Cool. So I guess just kind of recounting then, right after grad school, you hopped into your first job.
Yes.
So you didn't do a postdoc then?
I interviewed for a postdoc because, frankly, I didn't know what else was out there. And I was like, this is what everybody else does. So got to interview for a postdoc. And as I was writing up my thesis, I got offered a job. So I'll just share quickly that story. I had somebody asked to have a meeting. I was like, went down to their office. I chatted. I was like in jeans and a t-shirt, definitely no makeup. And at the end of the conversation, I got a job offer. And I didn't even know what to say. I was like, I didn't know I was interviewing. I didn't know there was a job opportunity. I didn't know this was a thing. I just literally said, huh? And they're like, when are you going to finish? And I'm like, in a few months. And they're like, so you want a job? And I was like, huh? And then that led me down the employment route.
So a bit of serendipity there. It's kind of a little bit of luck, I guess.
I always go with the idea that serendipity meets openness meets preparation. So I'm a big believer that you put yourself in the right spots and give yourself your opportunities, and then the universe will find you. I know that sounds very non-scientific, but at the same time, I have much lived experience in that space.
That's awesome. Wow. So it sounds like you can go from your PhD and cross fingers, place yourself right, and hopefully you get a job offer.
Yes.
Remind me, what was that exact job?
So I actually took a research, I think it was a research manager job with Alan Evans at the Montreal Neurological Institute. He was running a multi-site NIH-funded study looking at early risk factors for autism. His research manager who is named Rosie actually left, and then he hired Roseanne to replace Rosie. So the universe truly spoke. And I literally went from submitting my thesis on, I think, July 31st and started working full time August 1st with him.
Stars aligned.
Stars aligned. There's hope out there for everybody watching.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to finish with Roseanne and move over to Jarek now. We'll come back to you very shortly. But Jarek, welcome to our panel again. And for our audience, one more time, tell us about your current job.
So my current role is the Director of Advanced Analytics in a unit called the Data Science and Advanced Analytics unit in St. Michael's Hospital as part of the Unity Health Toronto network. So in this role, I am one of several teams, part of several teams that put data science solutions into deployment in the hospital, with the goal being primarily quality improves or other types of machine learning, stats, and AI-based solutions that are getting used in real time by clinicians, human resources, staffing, people overseeing staffing needs. So a variety of different things in hospital.
Cool. And I guess, so before you were kind of doing these advanced analytics in Toronto, what were you doing before that? What did you study in grad school? Let's start with there, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So in grad school, I guess there's like 2 grad schools. I did a master's in computer science a long time ago. Like Roseanne, I am not going to say when it was. And then I did a PhD in cognitive neuroscience at UT Dallas. And it was, I don't know, it was mostly genetics and psychiatric and neurological disorders and statistics, heavily statistics stuff. So that's what I did. On paper, it doesn't sound like I am in any way qualified for my current role. And then through that, I came here to Toronto to work at the Rotman as part of the Ontario Neurodegenerative Disease Research Initiative in Stephen Struthers' lab. And there I was part of the neuroinformatics and biostatistics team as part of the neurodegenerative project. So even though on paper, none of this really connects, everything I've done is kind of based on data and methods and understanding a lot of different types of data problems and understanding a lot of different types of problems that people are trying to solve.
Cool. And just to kind of clarify, your work with the Ontario Neurodegenerative, I'm going to get this wrong, Ontario yes. Neurodegenerative Research
Initiative.
Yeah. There we go. Was that a postdoc or?
Yeah, that was a postdoc. Yeah.
Very good. So two of our panelists have done a postdoc. One of us haven't. I haven't done a postdoc. I'm a master's, so what am I here? What am I doing? But okay, so that kind of covers then the scope of our panelists and their various jobs and kind of where they're at right now. And you'll kind of see that you can take your PhD skills or master's skills even and kind of go different ways. Obviously, the academic route is available, but there are other options as well in case you're kind of looking around and wondering if there are what you can do next. But I guess on that note, so all of you were at the end of your PhD at one point and thought to yourself, what is actually next and what options are available? So I guess I wonder if I'll open this to the floor to whoever wants to take it first. But when you were at that point, what were the options that you did consider and which were the ones that you rejected right away? And I'm wondering if you can kind of tell us about like why you kind of thought, this is right for me or this isn't right for me. I'll go straight. Yeah, just straight.
Yeah. So towards the end of my PhD, honestly, I think probably all of us share an interest and expertise in data analysis, and especially, I think Derek especially, and probably Rosanna as well. We like have a lot of expertise in data generation processes, and understanding how is the process by which data is being generated, and so we can put that into databases and kind of assist in that, assist in the data collection process, especially in the archiving and the utilization of data once it's in a database. Okay, but that's actually not the question that you wanted me to answer. So where was I thinking? Like, so I guess like I I knew that okay, again, I was trying to balance two things. I was very interested in, a particular scientific question or a set of scientific questions that I kind of arose at the end of my PhD, and I really, really wanted to pursue them. And then I also realized that, the academic job market, that's what, like 2012, 2013. It wasn't great then. I don't know if it's worse now. It's not great now, but like I was very like acutely aware that, I could have I was a pretty good scientist then, but maybe not the best. And I was aware that, I could work really hard in my postdoc and still not be able to find a scientific or find an academic position, at a tenure track position or at a research university. And so I was like, well, whatever I do, I need to make sure I develop skills that will make me employable in the broader job market. And, just thinking about the things that really interested me, like data analysis and data science, I was like, well, I need to position myself in a postdoc where I'm continuing to get those skills so that I can sort of leave the academic track and go on, find an industry position or something that's like, academia adjacent, but not necessarily a tenure track position. And so that's part of, so I sort of, in doing a postdoc or in finding a postdoc, I found something where I could both pursue my scientific interests as well as, further gain skills in data science and bioinformatics, which is like and kind of you can think of it as like data science applied to genetics and genomics type data sets. So that's kind of how I made that decision.
And so, how are you looking for those particular postdocs positions?
Well, I think honestly, the particular thing that I wanted to do, there are only really like the particular scientific thing I wanted to do. There are only like three or so labs in the world where I could do that. And it just happened that the lab that I had the best fit with was my postdoc lab, the one in Vancouver, and my postdoc advisor Paul Politis was really keen to let me try just to do some stuff, and he got it, and he was very, very kind in letting me pursue this research question and research idea. So I guess like, but just by virtue of like the scientific funnel and things being super specialized, I sort of made the decision for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm wondering if we can pass it back to one of our other panelists, Rosanna or Derek.
I'm going to offer a completely different perspective in the sense that I didn't have a topic that I was interested in pursuing at the end of my PhD. I loved research. I loved the doing of research, but I didn't. And beyond the brain, I mean, I've done research in epilepsy, autism, Alzheimer's disease, schizophrenia. Like I couldn't land on a topic. I just knew I liked the brain. But unlike Srijoy, I didn't have a very specific question I wanted to answer. I just love doing research. And so I probably rejected more the idea of doing a classic faculty tenure track appointment. And that's all I knew. I didn't know what else was out there. I did interviews for postdocs because I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. And this was at a time, which shall remain unnamed, where there was perhaps less opportunity for people to go out into different areas. So I just literally said, I've got to do a postdoc interview because otherwise I'm going to be homeless and unemployed. And then my love of research implementation, research management led me to an offer to do just that. So I just knew at the time that I loved training, I loved outreach, I loved the doing of research. I did not love as much the idea of all the aspects of a classic faculty track, which was grants, publications, and all of those things. And so that's all I knew. And so when I got the job opportunity and offer to do research management, I was like, okay, here we go. Let's start down this road and see what that looks like. And that led me to building my own team, building, like, going into innovation, going into training, and all the things I do now are exactly the things that I identified that I loved back then. So I do training, I do outreach, I do research implementation, I do innovation, I work with clinicians. But I don't have a uniform program of research. So I don't know, Nathan, if that helps you, but I basically rejected a path, found a different way, and then just segued into all the things that I identified that I loved for my current career.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that's really awesome. And I guess one thing I am actually specifically interested in is, so you mentioned you kind of had someone reach out to you for that first job. How did that happen?
Okay, so my PhD supervisor actually departed the country midway through my PhD. So I made the choice to stay in Canada to finish out my PhD. And as a virtue of that, I became a child of the department. So it took a village to raise like my PhD after his, I mean, obviously he was still supervising me and that was fine, but like he was in a different country. I was here. The department really embraced me. And one of the neuropsychologists on the project, he spent a lot of time talking to me about what I wanted to do, all that kind of good stuff. And he happened to be golfing with my future boss. And he mentioned to my future boss, hey, not sure what Roseanne's planning on doing after she graduates. She doesn't seem to be wanting to do like a formal thing. They talked about it on the golf course. And then about a couple weeks later, I got the invitation to go talk to my future boss. And that led me to a job. So a big part of what I tell trainees is put it out into the universe what you're looking for, because even if you are not necessarily have all the network, the hope is that people will think about what you're looking for, think about where your interests lie, and they may be able to introduce you or let other people know that you were open to other opportunities. Because that came through me sharing it, my challenges, aspirations with Gabe. Gabe mentioned it to Alan. Alan had a conversation with me. I got a job offer. So that's how that happened, Nathan.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I will say that I'll echo that as a currently unemployed individual, that putting it out there that I am looking for a job at some point. So, but on that note, it sounds like the key there was networking. So you had access to people in your department, and the people in your department had access to other people in their circles that kind of connected you there, and that was your way in.
And I always go with the idea, you don't know what you don't know. And so one of the things is you have to meet other people, talk to other people, learn what is out there, what other people are doing, because I was overwhelmed by what I didn't know. And honestly, that complete lack of knowledge and awareness was so frightening and intimidating and distressing that that led to the existential crisis. And I didn't realize I'd been putting out into the universe that I loved implementation, I loved organizing, I loved that management piece, and then the universe found me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Srishar, I think you wanted to say something quickly.
Yeah, I just want to say something quickly. Just that, like, I think it's great to have mentors and have people who sort of are looking out for you. And for myself, like, I spend a large amount of time writing reference letters and helping people find, if someone's finishing in my lab, helping them find their next position. Like, I think of that as like a big part of my job.
Yeah, awesome. I guess why don't we head back to Derek then? So when you were looking for your job now, or rather when you were finishing up your PhD, what were you looking at in terms of possible career paths forward?
Okay, so something.
I will say that you.
Go ahead.
I was just you're coming from a coding background. Most of us here at this conference are coders, and so I'm kind of thinking here, like, was it? I don't know, after your PhD, it could have been Amazon or Google, but you're now doing, work with Andre and research. So I'm wondering what kind of led you down that path.
So if we go back to like PhD and thinking what was next, I think somewhere in between Roseanne and Sridhar, I didn't know what to do besides I got to go do a postdoc. That's what I'm supposed to do. I was interested in just doing cool things with data in very particular domains. I really like the idea of working on problems that could translate and actually see something happen someday. So that's why I was so interested in neurological disorders. But at the end of my PhD, not thinking about what was actually next and already having like a network well established beforehand where my postdoc was pretty much in place for years before I even was ready for it. I was working at a bar and I'm like, I can just do this instead. I'm making way more money than I do as a PhD student, and I'll probably make more in this bar than I would as a postdoc, which is true. But so a little bit of like a kind of crisis, but also like a good one, I would say. And then through the postdoc, early on, I would say like I was just kind of expecting to go on the standard path, knowing, however, that the chances of that are just abysmal. So like a fraction of people can actually, or proportionally, like there are positions that exist for like traditional, this is what you're going to do in academia. And I was also realizing that I would say I'm a fairly all right scientist, but probably not a good academic. There are some things I just don't like about it. So I was trying to be revolutionary here and there, or just do things differently. And it does not work because you are working against a lot of inertia. So then how I ended up where I am, and I would say kind of what I started to do maybe midway in the postdoc, but was a little nervous about it, but then started doing it a little bit more, was any job at all that looked remotely cool in any way, I went for it. I didn't care if I was qualified or thought I was qualified, or if it was in my specialty. I just saw something here or there, and I was like, this looks cool. I think I could do this. I think I could be happy with this. And that led me to applying to lots of different places, government roles, industry roles, the current role that I'm in. And what I kind of learned over time too from that was something might look cool, but you need to tell people in your cover letters why maybe you deserve to be looked at. Because a lot of this, while based on networking, is also just luck. Good luck, bad luck. Whether you're at the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile is not up to you. Like, it's just how things come in and get sorted. I say this as someone in the hiring process right now. And I see a lot clearer, like why maybe I never got an email back or something. So the other side of that too is like, this is a numbers game. So when people are thinking about what is next and what you're going to do, it is unfortunately like numbers. You got to get out there. You got to just try for things. But if you just think something looks cool and you're like, I could be happy with that, you should absolutely pursue it. Because most of us, or all of us, in fact, here and in these domains, we have extraordinary skill sets that allow us to quickly pivot and adapt for anything that comes our way.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely like the message I picked up for myself in grad school, but I think a lot of other people here as well. It's like what we learned in grad school, the content was interesting. The specific topics might have been interesting, but at the end of the day, you're pulling out skills. And those are the skills that you're going to be using, and you're all nodding, using your skills and applying them in your new job. I guess, before I forget, I just wanted to mention the numbers game. I'm thinking of the Sankey diagrams that you see on Reddit once in a while of people and they're, I set this number of like emails or cover letters, this number of, and like, it's like 1% of them is like a response back. And then like a percentage of that is like an actual interview and so forth. So I definitely, if you're ever on Reddit and you're looking at the stuff, people put the stuff on Data is Beautiful, how much effort they went and put into trying to find their next thing. But going back onto our on topic, so again, we all have these skills, and I'm kind of thinking, obviously your jobs right now are not what you did in grad school, and because it wasn't that, there were probably there's a gap maybe in terms of where you were and where you had to get to now to be as successful successful in your current job, was it? How did you kind of know whether or not there were these knowledge gaps? Like, did you, when you were applying for these jobs, did you know that you needed to have this information, and were you prepping for that, or was some of this just kind of a surprise? And in the event that you did know that there were knowledge gaps, were you able to address them before, or, and if so, how? Sridhar, yeah.
Actually, Derek, go ahead.
So
okay, sure.
For my current role, and this is actually going to end up me like passing it over. I put a bunch of things that I thought like would make me qualified for the role in the cover letter, which obviously did. But then when it came time to start my job, I sent a message to Roseanne and said, "I don't know what I'm doing. Please tell me how to do my job." So find someone else who knows what they're doing to get some help in that transition, so that you can identify like what you might need to do.
That's interesting. I think that's, again, I think it gets back to my point about mentoring. Like, someone knows what they're doing better than you, hopefully, and go find those people, or talk to those people, figure out who those people are. What I was going to say, am I still here? Did I cut out?
No, you're here.
Okay. What I was going to say was, for me, it was like what I would like to say is like, it's like I tried to read the room a little bit, where the room is like, the academic job market, and see like, well, what, so given that there aren't that many positions, what are those positions, and who are the people getting those positions, and how can I make myself more like those people? So for me, it was like less of, I had this like sort of towards the end of my PhD, in the middle of my postdoc, I was like a bona fide neuroinformatician. I was building neuroscience databases by mining the neuroscience research literature. And that was great. I loved doing it, but I realized like I would probably never get a job doing that. I would never get a job where that was my main focus. But I saw like that there were plenty of jobs in bioinformatics, and especially because like, my current field is being revolutionized by technology. There's just so many new data sets coming out, and we just need number crunchers to crunch those data sets. So I was like, well, if I can gain skills in that, I will be more marketable on the job market. And so kind of my current position is a mix of both of those two skills, like the neuroinformatics side, sort of like working with large data sets, and on the bioinformatics side, just working with this particular type of molecular biology data. So but like sort of realizing that I needed to gain those skills in bioinformatics, that was like a multi-year process, and it also required some self-reflection. It required being open to retraining myself and gaining skills in something completely new. I didn't have to do that in my postdoc, but I realized that by doing that and taking the time to do it and learning things myself, that I would make myself a lot more marketable when I eventually went on the job market. And I think this happens a lot, especially in science, where it's very easy to specialize. And I think especially in the context of your PhD lab, you might be the expert of this particularly niche technology, but that's not the thing that's going to translate. The things that translate are more general skills, like working with data, science communication, like working with people. Those are skills that are like infinitely translatable across especially for going from academia to industry, or outside of academia or industry.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you came from a cell bio background. Did you know how to code at that point?
Yeah.
So you did know how to code. So okay, so it wasn't as though you were like starting de novo into bioinformatics for your postdoc, but at least.
Yeah, but I guess like the transition was going from like a basic neuroscience background to more of like a molecular biology, bioinformatics, like genome sequencing type background. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I guess we can move back to Roseanne if you want to chat about the knowledge gaps that we have.
I'm just going to qualify. Derek knows how to do his job. He just needs to talk to me about like other things. He completely knows how to do his job.
I wasn't convinced of that. Like as I was about to start, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why they hired me.
Yeah, but then I just told you, you knew how to do your job, so you're fine. I will say, unlike Srijoy, my knowledge gaps was probably more in certain projects and different populations that I'm working with. So I'm a foundational scientist by training, but part of my role was interfacing with clinicians and doing more clinical based research. And that was not my experience before. About 2 years into my position, I also started working with companies, so startups in the science space, and I had no idea what that looked like. Like, it's a completely different language. There are different, priorities for startups. There, even if they're scientific, you're working with engineers, CTOs, CFOs, like people who are not your classic scientist. And so my knowledge gap was probably about exactly what Treejoy is saying, is like, how do I relate to these individuals? How do I collaborate with these individuals? How do I find common opportunities to work on projects with them? How do we develop partnerships? And then how do we find a common language? How do I operate in a very different world where the pace is really different, the expectations are really different? They're not necessarily in it to explore a particular topic and generate knowledge in a manuscript. They have a very particular clinical question they need answered. They have a particular business problem they need answered, and that operates on a very different timeline, urgency, what expectation than I was used to. And so my knowledge gap was that. I wish I could say I could go and do a workshop on that, and that did not happen. I just literally learned on the job and just really was open and just thought, okay, what do I know? What are my skills? How can I apply them in this case, knowing I'm not doing fMRI analyses anymore? I am literally working on this database on the electronic medical record. We're doing, like, patient population based stuff. Like, how do I apply my skills here? So it was more about reflection, about openness, about embracing the challenge, building your internal confidence to be like, I think I know in principle how to do this. Let's see if this works. And then progressively just building, experience, confidence, reflection, its own quality improvement project. Like, you've got to, like, say, okay, what worked last time and what definitely did not work last time. And there's gonna be situations where it didn't work. So I think just being open to failure too. And so I think I'm a classic live it on the job, learn on the job, develop a reflection and an embrace of the unknown and just jump off the cliff kind of thing. Because honestly, that's how I got into industry. That's how I got into clinical. That's how I got into science communication. That's how I got into, some of the policy stuff that I do. And just being really open to learning from new people. Like, I learn as much from my clinician colleagues as I hope to impart to them on the research side. Likewise, our commercial people, our companies, our not for profits. And I think, existing in that learning space, which we all know, we all went into this to learn. And if you apply that in whatever you're going to go, I really am a big believer it'll serve you well. So, yeah, there's no formal workshop necessarily, but at the same time, I'm hoping I'm imparting some of the learnings I had, which was how I approached it. I'm not going to say you're not going to be scared and you're not going to be nervous. That's just a given. But I think if you draw solace from the fact that you spent a really long time building the exceptional skills Derek speaks to, you can work your way through it. I don't know.
Yeah.
This is something way much like a TED Talk and an inspirational, what a kumbaya moment, but that's what I got.
Awesome.
To build on that a little more, like, especially for everyone that's like currently, everyone's kind of basically in academia, and you got to think about how to translate this stuff to non-academic positions. It's kind of scary because you don't really know like what to do or how to do it. And we also have like a bit of a warped sense of what achievements are. So like if your thing is to get lots of grants and lots of papers and stuff, those are not the things that are counted elsewhere. So just like one paper that you've helped out on like half of, if you did some data analysis and some writing and some graphics, and you were part of it from the beginning to the end, these are things you should unpack and put down like on your resume, not your CV, as project management, written and verbal communication, visualization, data analysis, and data management. Like, you start pulling these things out, like just think about one paper and then look at the standard skills that you'd find elsewhere, and you realize just one project, whether it was successful or not, you can unpack this into a million different things that are immediately translatable. But that's hard. It's really hard to break out of that thinking like, oh, I only have 2 papers this year. It's like, no, if you're not going down that path, you have a million different skills that you repeat over and over very quickly.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a piece of advice that I got from a friend of mine on my resume was, instead of talking about here is the actual scientific thing that I studied, speak of it in terms of the methods that you were using and the impact that those methods had. And that was a weird thing for me to do, because I was, instead of saying, oh, I found this difference in this part of the brain, I was instead framing it as, I compressed 100 years of compute time into 3 weeks through high performance computing, which is like, a quantifiable impact. They're kind of a bit of a like throwaway, because it's not, it sounds impressive until you know how to do things and you're like, yes, they had access to a computing cluster. But it's the kind of thing where I think, that kind of, we think about our topic and that's the center of several years of work for us before we kind of think about moving into a different area. Or moving into our next role. And I guess one thing that is probably on the mind of a lot of people is, did you feel like you had the support available to you or from your supervisors to actually go and pursue some of the knowledge or skills that you wanted to have in preparation for your next role or next job? Is that something that, like, because I know that there are a lot of grad students who are probably like, my supervisor really wants me to focus on my thesis right now.
I want to follow up, or sorry, I want to answer that question. But what I was going to say before is like, I think like what we're hearing, I think especially from Roseanne and Derek, is like it's never too early to think about an industry job. And I think like, I strongly endorse that. So as someone in academia, I strongly endorse that. And I think like, it's sort of like a training plan or a learning plan for all of my trainees. I'm always thinking like, well, how are you going to, yes, like you're here to learn. I guess like I'm there to train someone how to be a scientist. That is their job. And that's not, I'm not training them how to be, I mean, part of that is training them how to be an academic, but that is not the metric of success, right? The success through the classical path is not the metric of success. It's like, are they learning how to be a scientist? Are they learning the skills of scientific practice? And they can apply those skills in both academia and industry. And in particular, I think what we're saying about the academic job market is like, as Derek mentioned, it is very unlikely for most people to find a job a job in traditional academia, running a lab like I do. So you have to, and I think, and now to answer Nathan's question, I think it's to your benefit to find advisors and find mentors who will shepherd your growth, not just your growth along as an academic, but also your growth more broadly, and so that you are developing skills that will make you, marketable and make you, allow you to go into industry should you so choose. Because probably most of us will. We should just realize that most of us will go on that path, and that's okay, right? So long as you're learning how to become relevant to that industry, then it'll be fine.
I would say that I think more so, okay, this might date me, but like, I think this current crop has more supportive supervisors and thesis supervisors and what have you than perhaps in cohorts prior. And I think, the reality of the job market is going to force that, because, I think supervisors want good things for their trainees. They want them to succeed. And I think there are brutal realities out there in terms of like wanting to have a family and wanting to get a job and wanting to buy a home and all those kinds of good things. I will say, like, I think even if a supervisor is supportive, one of the challenges is they are in the stream they are in for a reason, and they mentor in that stream, speaking to Srijoy's point. And there's no judgment there. Like, they're a scientist. They went the academic route. So of course they know how to mentor in that space. And even if they're supportive, and open to the conversation, they may not necessarily have the networks, tools, or, pathways to mentor you. So I always advise people, broaden your mentorship circle and include other people who have differing skills than your supervisor. So speak to people like even former trainees in your lab who've moved on to different things. Like, can they, speak to you about it? Go to networking events, ask for informational interviews with people who are doing cool things, like Derek says, right? Like, a lot of the research training centers at the TAS and hospitals have professional development to expose trainees to different people and different vocational stuff. So take advantage of those early. Even if you're like, I'm pretty 90% sure I'm going to go the academic route, take that 10% of uncertainty and go explore. And it may solidify that you're on the academic route. Fantastic. But if there's any kind of like uncertainty, may take advantage of all those things, have those conversations. And it may tweak you in a way that like maybe it's still kind of academic-y, but it's not your classic academic stream, because I'm academic-y, but I don't have a faculty appointment, right? But I still get to do all the things I love. And so I would say that yes, there are people who are supportive. They may not necessarily have the tools to tangibly give you strategies and tactics. And then part of it, your homework is to go and find those mentors, tools, opportunities, offerings, whether it be through, associations, research training centers, your own legwork and your own network, the network of your lab, the network of other people in your circle, to try to figure out what are the other exposures you can access. That's what I would advise anyway.
Cool. And I guess the last, Derek, if you have any comment on, support and mentorship and whether or not you were supported to develop the skills that you wanted to develop.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was. I had full support from everyone around me. I feel pretty lucky to have that. But at the same time, like, they're not from industry. Right, or in other positions, so it can be hard for like when you have these discussions, you're all kind of entering an unknown. Like, what am I going to do, or like, how do I do this? Sometimes, academics, they just, frankly, they just don't know, because they've been on this one path, and I think that's kind of a broader problem with academia, where it's harder to kind of go back and forth in some domains, not others. But yeah, I was supported, but I think there was always a bit of like, I don't know. And we're all kind of going, I don't know. So yeah, like Roseanne said, finding those other events and opportunities where people have made this like these moves elsewhere are going to be critical, because that's where you start to get that information, and then you can build plans around it for your path.
Like, I mean, my story is like supportive by nature. Like that whole serendipitous thing, they were supportive of me, right? But at the same time, like, I couldn't even think of my current job 5 years ago. I basically made my job over the past 5 years into what it is right now. So it's sometimes it's hard for people to envision. But what I would also say is make use of alumni. Make use of alumni from your lab, like your department. There are people who have moved on to amazing jobs and you just don't know. So like, network through, even if you don't like have big networks and that scares you, like, think about who was in the department 5 years ago and where are they now? Like, stalk people on LinkedIn and go be like, okay, somebody's at Facebook, somebody's at like Adobe, somebody's like at a startup, somebody's in academia. Reach out and say like, hey, I remember me, I was like a first year student, you were like a postdoc, you've got this amazing job now, can we do virtual coffee? Like, yeah, that's something that I would absolutely recommend.
That's awesome. I guess we're coming shortly to the end of our formally guided discussion, so we have two last questions. One, I guess, is what was the biggest challenge that you kind of faced after grad school, or maybe towards the end of grad school to now, in terms of your career journey? Was there anything that you felt was a particularly large hurdle that you had to overcome? Or on the converse, was there anything that you thought you would be really worried about and then didn't have to worry about at all?
I can start. So just sort of, just reiterating a point that we just mentioned about the difficulty at the academic job market. I was sort of like towards the middle of, early on in my postdoc, I met the person who is now my wife. She's amazing. And on our fourth date, she mentioned that she wanted to move back to, so we were in Vancouver at the time. She mentioned she wanted to move back to Southern Ontario to be closer to her family. And I was like, oh, there is no way I'm going to be able to find an academic position in Toronto or in Southern Ontario. So that will facilitate this. And that caused me like incredible stress throughout my postdoc. I was like, I will never be able to find an academic position in here. And that will allow us to like, be in, be together as, so just sort of balancing the stress of like finding that, academic positions are hard to come by in general, but finding them in a geographical area is even harder. I think like, and you often see a lot of academic couples who are sort of in different cities, and like, and I just don't understand why people do that. So I found that very, very difficult to sort of navigate that. But because like I had many years to sort of plan for this, like anytime there was an academic posting in Toronto, I sort of jumped on it and I sort of made connections like years in advance. And those connections ultimately helped me get my current position. So I just wanted to mention that like, so I would say my lab's doing pretty well. But there was a time in my postdoc where I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get an academic position. So, and I think that just kind of comes back to luck and just being lucky that, this really great neuroinformatics center opened up that, there's a position posted that I was kind of perfect for, and, getting this position, like that was all luck. And I probably would have been just as happy, in industry as well. So, yeah, so that was probably my greatest challenge. And so something that was easier than I thought. I don't actually know. I think a lot of things for starting a lab are really hard. Maybe one thing I think maybe that's not easier, but like, I'm kind of shocked that still, I've been doing science now for almost half my life. And I'm shocked by how much I still enjoy seeing new data. Like, I still get really excited, and like, I'll use like emojis and like exclamation points in my Slack messages. And like, I think that's probably one of my superpowers as an advisor, is like, it doesn't take much to excite me. Like, and that's good for like my students, because like, they get positive reinforcement. So it's really great. So I hope that feeling never goes away. And I think that's just like a good personality characteristic about me.
Cool. Greatest challenges, Roseanne and Derek?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's so many.
Real, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lot of them are they're like life-based, but like choices, and didn't have to necessarily like do these things. So like Srijoy mentioned, two-body problem. Jenny's in the other room. We all know Jenny. We wanted to not be apart. Finding two postdocs in one city in a new country is like wildly difficult. And we also didn't like the idea of having to like up and go after a year or two, like most postdocs do. So we talked to our advisors early on and said, the thing we're most interested in is stability. We just want to know we can continue doing work for a while. We don't want to have to like up and go. And then I guess some of the other greater like challenges to come with that is by moving to a new country, immigration sucks. It sucks, and it's super frustrating. So that, yeah, I would say that's some of the biggest challenges. It's just like not the academic things, but some of the stuff that comes along with, like the baggage that comes along with having to go to new places with new people and wanting to have certain things in life. Like these are a challenge, and you got to make a choice or pick your battles, knowing you're going to lose some of them.
Yeah. Daunting. Roseanne, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add here for challenges. I promise we're going to end on a happier note, but
Sure. Okay. Wow, that's pressure. I think biggest challenge for me was battling two things. One, my fear that I had wasted like 8 years of my life on a master's and PhD when I chose not to become a professor. I was like, I had spent so much time. I had gone to so many family events where all my family was like, "So you're a professor now, right?" And I'm like, "No." And okay. and I said existential, but there were a lot of tears. I'll be really honest. Like there were a lot of tears about like, did I spend 8 years of my life doing something that's not going to result in the expected? And that was my biggest challenge, like to turn my brain around that like I didn't waste 8 years of my life, and that I can do something meaningful, and that I can enjoy what I'm going to do, and have that like emoji filled data glee that Srijoy talks about, but not in the pathway that I anticipated. Um, so I think that was my biggest challenge, because we are trained a certain way. We're trained to like focus in and be hyper focused. And when I chose that I didn't want to be hyper focused, I had a moment of deep crisis where I thought like I just wasted a good chunk of my 20s and my early 30s on something that's not going to result. Um, the flip side of which was really easy was finding something that I loved. Like I actually found something that I'm so excited about, that I absolutely love to do, that I'm energized to do. And I would say that when and being open and being okay, the other part of this is the imposter syndrome part of it. So also being afraid of not being able to do your job. So like when I segued into my position, I was like, okay, I'm not a scientist. I love the idea of this, but actually, can I do my job? So unlike when Derek had his conversation with me, I had nobody to talk to. So I was just like gonna just wallow in whether or not I could do this job. And then, many years into it later, I can say it probably went better than I ever thought it would be when I first had that moment of crisis of, can I do my job? So all this to say, you can do the job that you're hoping you're going to end up in. You're just going to have moments of crisis leading to that. And that's my voice of optimism at the end of this at 12:01.
Awesome. I know that we are at the end of our actual technical discussion time. So at this point, if there are any questions from the audience, by all means, we're kind of moving into a bit of an open discussion group. And so if you have a question, go right ahead and feel comfortable to just share your own screen. Or if you don't want to share your screen, you can always just post it into the chat. We'll keep an eye out. But I guess kind of to start off our discussion, while we have questions coming in, one thing I'm wondering is there anything you would have done differently before, or like looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your career journey in terms of like, oh, I should have done this earlier, or you wish you knew this ahead of time?
I think about that a lot. And I look at the skill sets I had at different levels and years, like a decade ago, and go, I could have moved into the position I'm in right now. But to be very honest, I would not be where I am without this journey. So I try not to look back too much, because like it doesn't matter. I am where I am because of the journey, not necessarily because I made a mistake or a bad choice or something, or could have done something different at a different time. It's all part of, some unknown path.
I appreciate that, Zen. the learning to accept the world around you and your own experiences. I love that message. But on that note, Shujo and Roseanne, did you, keeping that in mind, or even then, did you still have any advice for your younger self?
I at the risk of ruining not ending on Derek's message, I think it's a great thing to end on. I'll just say, like, I wish I'd learned earlier to do things faster, and not just like do an analysis faster, but like learn to not obsess about things. I think like academia has a tendency to like, you want to do things perfectly, but oftentimes I think like, especially in industry or like, in many things, you just want the job done, and good enough is usually okay. So I think and that can, maybe to Derek's point, like I think like if you just learn to do things fast or do things quicker and be okay with pretty good answer but not a perfect answer, I think that might lead you to the the final thing faster. So that would be a message for my younger self.
I would concur with both Derek and Srijoy. So I would say that I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't make any difference. Like people like coming back to my crisis, I was like, did I just waste my time doing a PhD? I'm like 100% no. I couldn't do my job now without my PhD. So I wouldn't change any of it. But speaking to, you know, the it doesn't matter part, I wish and the faster and good is good enough part, I would say to myself, you know what? Every single decision is not a life and death decision. Like during that whole period, everything felt like even a minute decision would completely derail my future, and I would be like lost and aimless. I wish I knew now that like every single like every single decision doesn't have to be a world ending like apocalyptic walking dead zombies gonna eat you kind of like level of intensity. I didn't know that. I was just super hyper focused and I thought every single decision I made was gonna end my world. So knowing now where I am, if I could tell myself back then, I would still go through it, but I just would be like, just relax a little. Just relax a little is all I would tell myself.
Can I say one more thing, Nathan?
Yeah,
I think,
go for it.
again, to that point, Rosen, I think just it's never too early to think about self-care. And I think having good self-care practices early in your PhD will benefit you later in your life. I think I would often sort of prioritize working over, going to the gym or running in my PhD and my postdoc. And now I'm like militant, like, 5, 6 p.m. every day. I go to turn off my computer and I go to the gym, and I try my best not to open it again until 9 a.m. the next day. That I feel like that's, those are good habits that like enabled me to be effective every single day. So the sooner you can start good self-care, the better.
Yeah, awesome.
Work never goes away. It never goes away.
I read a funny quote the other day. Nobody had ever said on their deathbed, "I wish I got more work done." Right. So enjoy life a little and try not to stress about it too much. Cross your fingers, hope things work out.
Yeah, you're still gonna be there, so go do those things.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if we have any questions coming from our chat here. But I guess if there are any questions from our audience, feel free to send either myself a message or the BrainHack Gmail account, brainhacktoronto@gmail.com, or on our Discord, just shoot a question there, and I'll see if I can potentially pass it off to one of our panelists in future, if you want to get in touch or anything like that. Other than that, I think that brings us to the end. Is there any last comments from our panelists? Any last advice you want to share? Knowledge?
I would go with, you are way more capable than you feel you are at any given moment. And I think that it's really easy to focus on what is lacking or what is not there or what you think that you haven't achieved. But I think, speaking to Derek's point, you have in doing grad school and in getting your degree or in doing your postdoc, there are so many accomplishments that you may not have thought about. And I think, I would just say you've accomplished way more than you probably think you have.
Yeah,
and
on that point,
so I want to come back to this 2 seconds, because I did notice a question, and I want to make it so that we end this with a advice to the audience. But let's come back to it in 2 seconds. One question I'm getting here from, I'm sorry, I'm probably saying this wrong. Mojde. Any tips on how to overcome that imposter syndrome and boost my internal confidence? I think that's the biggest thing holding me back from even applying for many positions.
No, I'm constantly still going through it.
I think it never stops. It never, and it's like the higher, the further you go, the more you have. One thing that I found effective was like using social media less, and that led to me, comparing myself to people less. But yeah,
I would. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Roseanne.
You're also talking to the person who doesn't carry a cell phone.
You don't carry a cell phone?
No.
How?
Derek knows this about me.
I have 2 of them. One personal, one work, so I can't get away from some some things.
I would say I would agree with Srijoy, like less comparison probably is helpful because it's always easy to be like, oh, that person got a promotion, that person got a grant, that person got published, that person, whatever. Like, I think one, just really trying to clear that space. I would also say, like, in terms of boosting your confidence, I agree with you. Imposter syndrome is a thing, but I would say in terms of boosting your confidence, start small. Starts with small things in terms of like, even if it's like, I don't even know how to talk to people. Okay, relearn how to say hello and like just commit to yourself. Like, I'm going to introduce myself to one new person a month, right? Like that type of like literally. I'm just saying like start small, relearn how to say hello, commit to yourself that you're going to do something different, you know, whatever that might be, personally, professionally, what have you. Because once you achieve something, you're like, okay, that wasn't so hard. Okay, like that's a little success. Let's check that off. What's the next like path towards, you know, moving to that next place. And that to me is also that openness, right? Like say yes to different things and embrace the scary, right? Like I have meetings with companies, and 4 years ago, I would be so scared to talk to an industry person because I was afraid I was going to sound like an idiot. So, like, return on investment, I didn't even know what that meant when I first had my first meeting with an industry person years ago. And now I'm like, okay, I know exactly what they're talking about, but I took the meeting and I just learned. So, like, I go with embrace the scary in small amounts, manage your own scary. So, like, you know, there's no way you get away from not pushing yourself out of your comfort zone because that's just a reality. But you can manage how you do it in a way that you can manage your anxiety, is how I approach it, right? So start small, start incrementally, embrace the little scary so that when the big scary comes, it's not as scary. That's my approach.
Can I add on to that? I think
Yeah.
like academia has a tendency to like, people can sort of conflate their own self-worth with like where they're publishing or like their success as an academic. And I feel like that's very damaging. I do that and I've done that. And I think I'm trying to relearn not to do that. But sort of lately, like my identity, I have so many identities. Being an academic is just one of them. I'm a husband, I'm an uncle, I do CrossFit, I do a bunch of other things. I watch a lot of TV, and like those are all equal parts of my identity to being an academic, which of course is a very important part of my identity, but that's only one of those parts.
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like also just on the imposter syndrome bit too, one of the things that, I mean, I've also definitely felt this, and sometimes just looking back at my own CV and like having, not looked at it for months and then dusting it out and being like, oh my God, there's actually things in it. And I have actually done things. So on that note, like write it down that you have done it. Don't forget that you have. But then also looking back on it, and instead of thinking of it as why haven't I done more? This thing is already X number of pages long. Wow, I've done that much so far. Right. And I think that's something that we sometimes don't always appreciate, that we have actually accomplished something by the time that we're at the end of grad school, that we have done something with our lives and we have done interesting things, but we just don't necessarily appreciate what we've done at the time that we're doing it. Only when you look back, it's kind of, yeah.
And again, I realize I'm talking a lot, but I think maybe one thing to realize for the people listening is, like, I think all four of us, we're relatively good communicators, and that's probably probably why we were chosen for this panel. It's probably why we've all found jobs that are relatively good and suit ourselves. I think if you're not a good communicator and communicating gives you anxiety and like reaching out to people, maybe this isn't the position for you. Maybe you should just again, like I think like it's always it's a skill that you can develop, but maybe like again think about like, well, maybe an academic or academic adjacent position is not quite for me because like it really requires networking and communication.
We do have
I want to add a
question.
little
Actually,
bit
go for it. Derek, go for it.
To the imposter syndrome. Embrace it. Seriously, embrace it. So like mentioned, try not to compare yourself to others, but like compare yourself to yourself. And if you embrace it a little bit, yeah, you might not be very confident on something, but you're going to keep working at it. Like if you think like, oh, I could be a little bit better at this, don't let it become an obsession, but let it be a little bit of a motivator. And to be honest, I'd rather work with people who have imposter syndrome than don't. Because yeah, having someone who can do and then is also willing to keep like working and understanding and trying to develop, it's a lot better than someone who's like, no, I'm good.
And maybe a way you might be able to think about it with imposter syndrome is, you know, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And so that the problem space or the space of things that, you know, you don't know is growing faster than the things that you could ever learn. And you don't realize like the magnitude of that and how much you could learn until you kind of take that first step in doing grad school and like learning all these new things in your life. And so kind of, you know, imposter syndrome is an outcome potentially of having actually gone through that process of learning a lot. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you have self-awareness about where your own limitations of knowledge might be, but also then, you know, an inkling to be like, at least I know that this is something that I don't know, rather than the ignorance of not knowing the things that you don't know. And so, yeah, I do also see another question here. One concern that I have of trying out trajectories is that I don't feel like there is a way back if I ever switch to a non-academic job, especially as an international worker. Do you have any? Do you have suggestions about how to explore that? Let me just add here as a quick note. I think Shujoy, you're from America, I believe, right? Texas, and Derek is also from the U.S. So while, you know, the U.S. is not another country outside of North America like Mexico or whatever, it is an international country, and you had to go through immigration, and probably these were things that you were thinking about. So yeah, I'm wondering, do you have any suggestions about how to explore trajectories that are non-academic, especially when you're coming from a international background?
Other than like sort of apply for permanent residency in the country in which you're working as soon as possible, I don't really have any other suggestions. I think and the other sort of concern about once you sort of make the transition from a traditional academic job to a non-academic job, how easy it to switch back. I feel like I can't really speak to that, but I think there's internship opportunities, like for example, through my text that might allow you to explore those paths without leaving, you know, fully.
And that's what I was actually just going to suggest. There are a number of programs that allow for, even while you're doing your graduate studies, to do blocks like MyTax, for example. Even if you're like, some of the RTCs have internships. So like, for example, the Baycrest one, like we've offered internships for our trainees even during the graduate period. Status might complicate things if you're not able to work in Canada, and that you know, your individual situation. But I mean, there's a lot of places that do offer internships, like the Ontario Brain Institute, for example, has a whole internship program built around people who want to transition. But it's not like you've taken a full-time job and you can never go back, kind of thing. Other, you know, not-for-profits have internships as well. You would even say, like, not that grad students have a ton of time, but like if you're early enough in your graduate studies or your postdoc, like look at some organizations you wouldn't mind volunteering with, right? So for example, if you're thinking about the not-for-profit space, everybody's looking for a volunteer, like, you know, in that sense. And so not that I'm devaluing or nobody should get paid, that's not what I'm saying, but like that's a way to dabble and take a look at different things. So service is an opportunity that you can take a look at to expose yourself to different things. Internships are another way to do it. You know, programs like MyTax, which can also like formalize or if your supervisor actually is applying for tri-council money that'll work with companies, for example, be getting on those types of projects will give you a slightly industry exposure even within the context of your lab. So status shouldn't matter. So like there are like NSERC, I think SHIRK, have grants that are like very specific. They used to be the alliance grants with NSERC, but like would work with like different organizations or companies. So if your supervisor is willing to apply for those and work with a company, then that's a way to do it without, you know, going all in. Those are the three things I would suggest.
For the kind of like back and forth, yeah, take advantage of anything you can during a training period to do this. Because generally in academia, it's certain domains that really do facilitate the back and forth. Something more medical, more biology, stats, these things have long histories of people moving between academia and government or industry. Other domains just don't. They will someday. This is going to happen. But it's a little harder in some domains than others. And then for international workers, this one is a little tricky. First thing I would do is go read the treaties for the country you're in and the country you have citizenship in, to understand what options are available to you, because there's a lot of stuff in there that is usually pretty open. Canada especially has a lot of different treaties with a lot of kind of openness on work. The catch is that doesn't mean the places you want to work actually understand them, because they don't necessarily have the lawyers at the ready to tell them what is and is not doable. So I guess the fortunate or unfortunate side on that is you would have to look towards larger entities that have a ton of money and have lawyers. You can try to work with HR and other places where you're interested and try to explain it, but that does not mean they'll go for it, because frankly, some of these things are very hard to understand. But usually the bigger the place, the more honed they are when it comes to this.
Yeah, like the bigger tech companies who are interested in getting talent from wherever. I think COVID may have opened more places up to taking international workers and might be more open to navigating that space. But I agree, it's usually the larger organizations that are willing to navigate the immigration and work laws, if they're really wanting a particular talent to come to them.
That's really awesome. And I'm just thinking about this in terms of, is it hard to go into a industry or non-academic position and then back into academia? I feel as though perhaps things have changed in more recent years. People don't feel as though that's as much of a problem than perhaps in past. I might be wrong. I'm thinking that if you decide to go and do something that's with a company as while in faculty potentially or not, people aren't shading you and oh, you're now tainted by corporate money.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing anymore, because it's just things are so applications and translational, at least in the biomedical space. And there's so applications, translational focus. It's just going to be seen as a perk, right? Rather than being some boring academic who just does their own niche area that is completely irrelevant. This person has actual experiences.
That's seen as a boon.
But so the catch in some domains is that by the exit and trying to re-enter is you don't have an established set of research in the past few years. So when it's time to write a grant, someone has been told, rate this person on their productivity in the last couple of years. And if you don't have something that translates from that industry back, then you just get terrible scores. So it just makes it harder because of some of the ways that some structures are set up. But it is easier in some domains.
Yeah, because I would say some industries will put non-disclosures on their employees, so they can't publish or they can't not present, right? And then academia still operates on an incentive structure that if you're prevented from in certain companies or domains or what have you, you'll run into the problem Derek has in that sense, because the incentivization frameworks don't align to a certain extent. I think it is domain specific, and it might depend on but some companies are really open to still wanting to publish and go to conferences too, right? So it can be a case by case thing, but Derek's right. There are companies with non-disclosure and non-public clauses on their employees.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's it's a combination of potentially, especially if you're international, looking at a large enough institution, but also then finding the right kind of opportunities that will let you straddle both trajectories moving forward. Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I hadn't actually thought about continuing, and the fact that when you go back into academia, they're looking at your publication history rather than potentially all the other wonderful things you might have done in industry. Makes it a little bit different than perhaps the revolving door of public and private sector, or like government and private sector. Sometimes I know in past it was seen as a bit of crossing the Rubicon, but now it's kind of we accepted practice that this is just how one moves in the ranks. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So let's try and do that last thing one more time. Advice for the audience. Last words.
Yeah, I'll start. So your path is your own. You are unique, and if you have an open mind, you will find something that makes you happy. You'll hopefully find something that makes you happy.
Awesome.
You've done a lot more than you think you have. Don't use the metrics of academia to judge yourself.
And I would actually say reflect on what you really enjoy. Like, actually take the time and think about what you love about what you do and what you hate about what you do. And then lean into the things that you love, because when you're doing things that you love, that gives you motivation, that drives you to find an opportunity that aligns with that. But if you haven't spent the time actually reflecting on what you love and what you don't, then it's hard to go find that nirvana, right? Like, that's why at the end of my journey, I knew I liked doing the research, training, outreach, and communication. And now I have a job that does that, because I recognize that and I leaned into it. It took me a while to get there, but I leaned into that. And so I think if you invest in yourself, invest in what you love, then it'll lead you in a better path. I think that's my take on it.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel that message for myself. Even as I apply for jobs now, I'm thinking like, oh wow, my interests are becoming clearer to me as I'm going through this process of figuring out which jobs actually appeal to me and actually, make me want to sit down and get excited to write a cover letter. But yeah, okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Srijoy, Derek, and Roseanne. Hopefully we'll see you guys again at a future BrainHack. But I think we've had a ton of really awesome advice. If there's ever a chance, attendees here, if you want to go back and see what was discussed again, you can always do so through the replay options on the left. But without any more, I guess that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you again so much, and hopefully we've all learned a lot.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.
Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.